Taiwan's most serious COVID outbreak shows signs of peaking, but the country faces its latest vaccination challenge.
I'm Bing Wong for TaiwanPlus, and I'm here at the Dragon Boat Festival competition, where one team is challenging stereotypes for all visually impaired people.
Semiconductors and tech lead Taiwan's push for stronger trade ties with the US and Europe.
Today is World Bike Day. I'm Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus. I'm going to mark the day by going for a ride on one of Taipei's public bicycles.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwan recorded 76,564 new COVID cases Friday. Taiwan's health minister says the ongoing wave of COVID cases will ease in the coming days. But while high vaccination among adults is helping, children are still vulnerable. 13 children have now died since the pandemic began. John Van Trieste has this report.
This is the latest frontier in Taiwan's battle against its most severe COVID outbreak yet. Child vaccination centers have been set up in the country's 6 biggest cities. On Friday, Premier Su Tseng-chang visited the center set up in the central city of Taichung and hailed it as an early success.
比如我们台中种种设的这个施打站，3天来就5000人，今天就1000多人已经预约要施打，不但给家长方便，孩童受到保护，而且减轻了地方的负担。
Authorities say the current COVID wave may soon start to ebb. The country's health minister estimates that by the end of this week, 90% of Taiwan's people will have had at least one COVID jab. And the growing number of people who've had COVID is helping too.
10%左右，其实疫情就有一些的相对的反转。我们现在的趋势看起来跟新加坡还蛮像的，就一个丘陵的形状。
He says the daily tally of new cases could fall in 10 days' time. But not everyone can breathe easy. It's been just a month since Taiwan started vaccinating children under 12, and children under 5 still can't get a vaccine. There are 7 mass vaccination centers for 5 to 11-year-olds. Taichung's mayor says 54% of the city's children have been vaccinated, and in Taipei, it's predicted that more than half the eligible children will be vaccinated by the end of the week. James Rayner and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The annual Dragon Boat race is coming up this long weekend, a race that dates back centuries. The competition was scaled down last year, but this year the restrictions have been lifted. TaiwanPlus reporter Bing Wong caught up with a visually impaired team on their first foray into the competition.
Rowing to the beat of their own drum. For the last 2 months, Yamin has been leading her Dragon Boat team down this river to practice.
就是有部分的朋友都是视障朋友，有弱势的朋友，有全盲的朋友，那再加上陪跑员组成的一个龙舟队，所以取名为睁一只眼闭一只眼。
The team began as a support group for the visually impaired, hosting activities for them to socialize. It's Turn a Blind Eye's first foray into the annual Dragon Boat competition, where they're hoping to challenge stereotypes that one needs to have sight to participate in sports.
大部分都已经认识了，因为我们是由一群陪跑员跟视障朋友组成的龙舟队伍，对，所以我们平常其实是一起跑步的。
They even have their biggest fan to cheer them on. The Dragon Boat Festival dates back millennia in Asian cultures. It's celebrated on the 5th day of the 5th month on the lunar calendar. And this 3-day race in Taipei is one of the most popular sporting events. 4,000 people and hundreds of teams will come here to celebrate on this river. Some teams have competed together for decades, even training all year round. Other teams are in it just to have fun. Turn a Blind Eye have been practicing for around 2 months. While it may be hard for them to see, they use specially taped paddles to help them guide their movements.
是因为就是那个龙舟它握桨的时候有一定的高度，那因为有一些朋友的视力不好，或者是我们看不清楚，那它这个是为了标注那个定位，然后让我们握到正确的位置这样子。
By listening to the drum beats, the team knows exactly when to paddle in unison. Turn a Blind Eye may not be in the competition to win, but they are here to prove that they can compete as well as anyone. and in turn raise awareness of the struggles and successes of visually impaired people in Taiwan. Damon Lin and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
The Dragon Boat Festival was originally a holiday commemorating the death of an ancient poet, but modern festivities are much livelier. Andrew Ryan has more.
Two dragon boat crews paddle fiercely, trying to pull the other team over the center line. This tug of war is part of the Dragon Boat Festival. Originally, it was a day of traditions to commemorate the death of an ancient Chinese poet called Qu Yuan. According to legend, he drowned himself in despair over the warring politics of the time. People went out in boats to save him, but to no avail. More than 2,000 years later, that ancient search and rescue operation has transformed into the lively dragon boat races that mark the festival. Another enduring tradition, sticky rice dumplings wrapped in bamboo leaves and stuffed with a variety of fillings, called zongzi. Legend has it these dumplings were thrown into the river where the poet drowned, so the fish wouldn't eat his body. Today, they're so popular that people line up for hours to get them.
7點51分，有當今日買無啊？咱這排頭前的吼，較袂這樣複雜啊。這麼疫情，
就是因為昨天來的時候沒有吃到，很可惜啊。
The dumpling eating tradition goes on for several days, so there's still plenty of time to get in line. Rick Yi, Yu Jing Huang, and Andrew Ryan for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is speeding up its disbursement of domestic travel subsidies to rev up the tourism sector, which has been hard hit by the pandemic. Discounts and subsidies will be handed out starting mid-July, 2 months ahead of what was originally scheduled. Backpackers traveling on weekdays can get a one-time accommodation subsidy of up to $40. There will also be discounts on group travel, entry to parks, and bus fares. Taiwan's borders have been closed to foreign tourists since early 2020. A tourism official said the subsidy for domestic travelers will help warm up the industry when the borders reopen. The U.S. has reintroduced a line about not supporting Taiwan independence to its online fact sheet. Last month, the State Department removed it, but a sentence saying Washington did not support Taiwan's independence was put back in on May 28th. Although the line about Beijing's position that Taiwan is part of China, which had also disappeared last month, has not been restored, Washington has since said the update did not reflect a change in policy. Taiwan and the European Union have agreed to forge stronger ties in trade and cooperation, especially in semiconductors. The annual high-level talks were held by video conference. The two sides discussed setting up a platform for strategic issues, including the semiconductor or supply chain and offshore wind power. The EU is Taiwan's 5th largest trading partner and a country's biggest source of foreign investment. The Taiwan-EU talks follow the announcement of new trade negotiations between Taipei and Washington on Wednesday. Those are being described as a historic breakthrough. To find out more about the trade talks, TaiwanPlus reporter Rick Cloward spoke with Roy Lee, Senior Deputy Executive Director at the Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research. Rick began by asking him his expectations for the negotiations.
First of all, I think it is actually a very exciting development because looking back in the last 2 decades, we have a lot of opportunities to have a dialogue or discussion, or even negotiations with the United States. But most of the issues covered in those discussions are technical in nature. So this is the first time, as far as I understand, this is the first time that the U.S. agrees to include forward-looking or regional initiatives as part of the U.S.-Taiwan bilateral discussion. And it is important in both symbolic and substance.
We know that Taiwan often struggles to be part of other trade agreements or trade blocs. So why is it important that it has a trade agreement with the U.S.?
Well, actually, all trade agreements or trade initiatives are important to Taiwan. But in the last 3 decades, Taiwan has been prevented from participating meaningfully in many of the trade talks with our major trading partners. So, and the U.S. now, since the last 3 years, U.S. is now returning to, for example, Taiwan's second largest export market next to China. And also looking in the future, the U.S. will become one of the major destinations for Taiwan's supply chain relocation and also, of course, investment. So it is important because the U.S. is one of the most important trade and investment partners to Taiwan. And it is also important because it provides one of the rare opportunities for Taiwan to have institutionalized or formal dialogue and negotiation mechanism with the major trading partners.
To what extent do you think that these new trade negotiations could be the start of something bigger, for example, joining trade blocs like the CPTPP?
Of course, it facilitates Taiwan's effort in other undertakings, including the CPTPP. It facilitates because the initiative reflects the U.S. support and confidence, and also it reflects kind of the U.S. Credential about Taiwan's credential as a key economic player in the global and regional stage. Right? So it underscores the importance of Taiwan's participation economically.
The U.S. says Taiwan is failing to guarantee some religious rights of foreign domestic workers, but acknowledges that progress has been made. In an annual report on religious freedom around the world, the U.S. says domestic workers in Taiwan are not legally entitled to a weekly day off. This affects more than 200,000 foreign workers, many of whom are Muslims from Indonesia and Catholics from the Philippines. In some cases, workers fail to get the days off promised in their contracts. Taiwan has said that such incidents can be reported to the Labor Ministry. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the measure is a sign of progress.
In Taiwan, authorities are making it easier to report employers who refuse to give their workers a weekly rest day in order to attend religious services.
The arrival of Dragon Boat Festival means that summer is truly here. Animals at Taipei Zoo, including a pair of otters, kicked off celebrations early with a meal of specially prepared rice dumplings. Known as zongzi, these balls of rice with fillings wrapped in bamboo leaves are a traditional Dragon Boat Festival snack. Zookeepers put a spin on those treats by filling them with ice, fruit, vegetables, and even seafood. That's to keep the zoo's residents cool as the temperatures rise in Taiwan. Coming up, we take you to northern Taiwan to meet two chefs brewing up unique desserts. Details after the break.
Iconic food of Taiwan, beef noodle soup. This one is $24 US, $28, $337 US bowl of noodle soup.
Oh, it's expensive.
It's very, very tender, and then it still maintains the characteristics of the fiber of the beef. It just melts in your mouth almost.
Interesting, I never tried something like that.
Jason's Table, Shocked and Surprised, is on TaiwanPlus.
"这是我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起，在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus. For more great stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Okay, there's a couple here. There's one here. You see, 2, 3. 到目前的为止，大概6只而已啊，真的不多。赚不到钱呢，要钱也不够啊。来了，你看，又来了。I'm going to prepare them in a more European way. I'm going to smoke these eels. The best part, put it in your mouth.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. 1/5 of Ukrainian territory is now under Russian occupation, according to the country's leader. President Volodymyr Zelensky told lawmakers in Luxembourg that the front line between his army and the invading Russian forces stretches over 1,000 kilometers. As the invasion nears its 100th day, Russian forces have intensified their attack on Severodonetsk, the easternmost city still under Ukrainian control. Some 15,000 civilians remain trapped in the city. Many are taking shelter at a chemical plant that Zelensky had accused Russia of targeting during an artillery barrage. Protests have erupted among Shanghai residents who remain under COVID-19 lockdown after restrictions were lifted for most of the city. Dozens of people in a downtown compound were filmed confronting police and removing barricades on Thursday. This was after 2 false positives prompted authorities to extend their lockdown. On June 1st, Shanghai ended nearly 2 months of home confinement in many parts of the city, allowing people to move freely. But community cases have been rising again, forcing some areas back into lockdown. Earlier this week, thousands clashed with police on the outskirts of Beijing over ongoing COVID-19 restrictions. It's a slam dunk for LeBron James, who has become the first active NBA player to reach billionaire status. Forbes valued the Los Angeles Lakers star's net worth at over $1 billion on Thursday. They estimated that he earned over $120 million last year alone. James's off-court earnings far exceed his $400 million payout from his NBA career. Forbes projects the basketball superstar ranked in most of his earnings from business investments and endorsements. NBA legend Michael Jordan is the only other basketball billionaire, but didn't reach that status until over a decade after retirement. Japanese engineers have invented a robot to help dentists practice treating children. The inventors hope the robot will help fill a gap in dentist training and maybe one day help train others who work with children too. John Van Trieste has this report.
Meet Pedioroid, a lifelike robot programmed to behave like a young patient in a dentist's chair. The doll-like robot can kick, squirm, and cry like a real child. It can also mimic a range of medical conditions, training dentists to respond to real scenarios, even emergencies like convulsions and heart failure. The robot's Japanese inventors say their product will be invaluable for dentists in training.
小児の歯科治療っていうのはですね、練習する機会がないのでなかなか体験することができないんですね。でさらにその暴れ回るっていうところの危険性もありますし、子どもっていうのはどうしても急変した場合自分で具合が悪いということを表現できないので、そこを全身管理観察する知識経験っていうのが必要なんですけど、そのトレーニングをする場がないので実際の本番になってしまう、そういうところをシミュレートできるように、開発いたしました。
They've spared no effort to make Pedioroid as realistic as possible. Its pupils dilate, it can cough and sneeze. Even the color of its face changes depending on the health condition it's simulating. The result is a robot with a price tag of close to $200,000. But the inventors are optimistic, and they foresee a market beyond dentists in training.
さらにですね、今後の展開としては、お子さんを持つお母さんだったり、小学校保育士 看護師の方々にも、子どもに関わるいろいろな方々に体験してシミュレートしていただけるように開発を進めたいと思っています。
The hope is responding to simulated crises could just translate into the experience needed to save lives when a real emergency strikes. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
There are 2 million bicycles in use in the world, and many of them were made in Taiwan. In the last several decades, Taiwan has transformed from a country that not only makes bikes to a place that encourages people to make cycling part of their daily life. Today on World Bicycle Day, our reporter Jaime Okan marking the day on 2 wheels.
"15 years ago, if you wanted to ride around Taipei, it'd have to be on one of these. But in 2012, Taipei launched a public bike sharing system called U-Bike. Now in a moment, I'm going to take one of these for a spin. But first, a little background.
Taiwan's obsession with bicycles can be traced back to the 1970s, with the rise of homegrown manufacturers like Giant and Merida. They make some of the world's best bicycles. And while Taiwan was making a lot of bikes, few people were actually using them until about a decade ago. Giant teamed up with the city of Taipei to launch U-Bike, a public bike sharing system that took inspiration from a program in Paris.
I'm here at National Taiwan University, which is one of the most busiest U-Bike stations in the city. With more than 30,000 rides in May alone, it's no wonder that there's only a few bikes left. Now I've got an Easy Card here that I've registered with the system, and I'm going to rent one of these bikes. All you have to do is push the green button on the display, tap your card, and once you hear the beep, you're good to go.
There are hundreds of kilometers of dedicated bike paths in Taipei that enable bikers to ride around the city separate from the traffic. And those paths stretch far beyond the capital. There are more than 7,000 kilometers of bikeways crisscrossing the nation. U-Bikes are available in almost every major city in Taiwan, including New Taipei, Taichung, and even as far south as Kaohsiung. And the numbers of stations is growing. By the end of this year, Taipei will have about 1,200 stations, and that means no matter where you are in the city, the nearest U-Bike will only be about 200 meters away.
我一下了捷运，一下了公车，我马上就有非常方便的 U-Bike 可以选择，那我就可以去到更深入的地方，例如有很多的河滨公园啊，那所以大家也就愿意更往户外跑，然后也更健康、更环保，是这样子发展的过程。
With thousands of more U-Bikes set to go into service this year, Taiwan is making it even easier for its scooter-loving populace to opt for a quieter, more environmentally friendly set of wheels. Klein Wang, Eugene Huang, and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is famous for the variety and quality of its tea. We now take you to Taoyuan, where 2 chefs, one originally from Singapore, are brewing up unique ways to use tea to tantalize the palate.
台湾茶的优势，其实真的是一个大自然的，赋给台湾茶的一个很大的特点。那我们应该要去珍惜它。
台湾好茶声名远播，在桃园复兴山区，上午阳光普照，午后雾气刚过。有一款几乎绝迹的大叶佛手茶，产量少，品质好，花了好几年时间富裕种植。
老师，所以你们摘是最理想的叶型是怎么样？
最理想大概就是这一叶还可以采，这一叶就不好。
林衍成和太太甘碧华为了探寻台湾好茶浸泡产地，因为在找茶的过程，还能从产地带回装饰灵感，赋予茶甜点产品更多大自然的元素。对台湾茶的印象是从手摇饮启蒙，一直到真正移居台湾，才接触了香气多变、滋味高雅的茶汤，让他大开眼界。
像 Shanghai Tea 是第一个是在摆盘的设计上是希望它像盘式甜点，所以盘式甜点一定会有一个 sorbet， 然后还有一些 cream 的东西。那最主要盘式甜点也会出现一些氮气瓶这种打出来的泡沫状的东西。
小夫妻的第一款创作要做水果茶，切出薄如羽翼的水果片，在佛手乌龙茶汤内漂浮，在边缘挤上香提鲜奶油，亮眼的莓果泡泡搭配夏日感十足的芒果雪酪。拿在手中的玻璃杯，精选匠人工艺作品，每一个手工杯价值不菲。灯光下闪烁的光芒，就像林衍成和甘碧华内敛却耀眼的自信心，简约明亮而且有质感。菜单设计的产品图样也都是林衍成一笔一画勾勒出内心那幅茶甜点的样貌。
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Finally, today we leave you with images of corgis gathering at a cafe in London where they enjoy dog biscuits and puppuccinos, a canine-friendly take on cappuccino. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.